Hey guys, TJ here at Top Tech, and I'm going to talk about Sylvans today. First, we'll start off with the monsters. We have 3 Curry Bandits. Curry Bandit is the strongest card in the deck to get your engine rolling. Puts 5 cards in your graveyard. We're a very graveyard-based deck, and it gets a spell. We have very powerful spells. We want to get like our Soul Charges and our Miracle Fertilizers, so it digs towards those, as well as digging towards putting Lonefire in our grave, which is one of the most important things in our deck. We don't actually need to draw Lonefire Blossom, we need to find Lonefire Blossom in some capacity. Putting it in our graveyard, good enough normally, since we have 6 ways to revive it. Curry Bandit digs deeper than any other card, which is what makes it such a great early play and even mid-game sometimes. And excavating cards like Hermitry, Mushroom, and Martial Leaf can create a lot of value. I don't know if I mentioned Sage Koya too, being able to do something like play Charity, summon Curry Bandit, mill your cards. When you hit a Sage, add Charity back to your hand. Maybe pop a card with Mushroom or with Martial Leaf if you want second. Really, really good value. Then we have the workhorses of the deck, the monsters we're really going to rely on to make a lot of our plays. 3 Hermitries and 3 Sage Koyas. Sage Koya lets you drop them from your hand when a Sylvan gets sent to your graveyard, normally by excavation. And Hermitry lets you draw a card when you excavate a Sylvan. They both have effects when they're excavated. He gets a Sylvan spell back from your grave to your hand. Might be a spell or trap. And he rearranges your top 3 cards. So a lot of your plays will revolve around putting a Hermitry into play. You're going to mill. You can special Sage Koya if you hit something. And then you're going to try to go off further from there. This card creates a lot of advantage just by drawing you cards while it's sitting in play. A lot of cool interactions where you stack your cards with something like Charity or Mount Sylvania. And then you get to mill a card like Mushroom or Martial Leaf. When you mill them, you get to pop a card so you can create even more pluses off your Hermitry. So, you know, let's say you Charity, you Miracle Fertilizer for Hermitry, you mill a Mushroom, you get to pop a back row, draw a card, and then if you had a Sage Koya, you can drop your Sage and create pretty big boards pretty quickly. Then our last Sylvan monster is 2 Sylvan Princess Sprouts. Princess Sprouts kind of like a better copy plan for our deck, since it lets us get the levels when it's excavated, and when you draw it, you can summon it, tribute it, and then you get to mill a card and stack it back on top. So a lot of the time, this will let you make plays where you can search it off something, perhaps even like a Lonefire. You get to excavate an extra card, then mill it with your Hermitry to draw another card, and then have 2 monsters in play at the right levels. The best card in our deck, Lonefire Blossom. Lonefire is honestly the linchpin of the deck. If you don't find Lonefire in a game, I'm not going to say you're going to lose, but you're going to have a harder time than if you did see Lonefire, obviously. Lonefire plus Soul Charge is the best opening you can get. It's really hard to lose. I mean, Lonefire Soul Charge plus other cards is insane, but just Lonefire Soul Charge is already really good. So, not too much to say about this card. He's been broken since plants were a thing, and he'll stay broken as long as plants are a thing. Then, one-ofs, we have Spore and Blaster. Spore gives us a lot of options in our extra deck. You can recur it as a level 1 tutor, which is really awesome with things like Miracle Fertilizer and Soul Charge. And more importantly, you can bring it out with its ability to make it a level 8 a lot of the time. So you can do a lot of plays that are like make a Stardust Spark, bring this back with the Sage Koya, and then make a Felgrand with your Hermitry. Blaster is a recurable body, which is good on its own. Everyone should be familiar with how strong the Dragon Rollers are just as free cards. We play 8 Fire-type monsters, which is a lot to use for both his abilities, the Special Summon and the Pitch. A Lonefire automatically fuels him if you're in a rough spot. You normally don't want to remove Lonefire, but if you have to, the play is obviously available. And 2800 is really big. Level 7 is a great level for our deck. It works well with our Spore to make 8s. Works well with Sage Koya to make Exceeds. For our spells, our most generic spells, 3 Upstarts and 3 Soul Charge. Obviously, you want to be playing a smaller deck when your goal is to open Lonefire Soul Charge as much as possible, or just Soul Charge in general, really. So Upstart Goblin seems like a given. I've explained how good Soul Charge is in the deck. If you open something like Lonefire Soul Charge, you can easily, or especially if you draw like Mount Sylvania with it, you can easily get a field of like double Felgrand Stardust Spark. If you've ever had that opening field and lost the game, I would be surprised. Then 3 Miracle Fertilizers. One of the cool things about this card is the emphasis it takes away from our deck on our normal summon. It's why our normal summons really consist of Lonefire and Curry Bandit. Yes, you can summon Martial Leaf in a bad spot. Yes, you can set Mushroom in a bad spot. But, like, this is your normal summon, really. If these are in play, you're not normal summoning. You're using them to bring back Sages and Hermitries. Which is really strong, obviously. Or even, you can bring back Lonefire and let the Miracle Fertilizer die. Because getting Lonefire is that good. And then we have 3 Sylvan Charities and 3 Mount Sylvanias. Sylvan Charity is another one of the best cards in the deck. If you've played Magic the Gathering and are familiar with Brainstorm, you know just how good that effect is. Especially when you can manipulate your deck afterwards with a search effect to shuffle or even to mill those cards away. This deck has a lot of those abilities. So you can put cards you don't want on top, shuffle them away. You can put cards you want to mill on top, mill them away. Mount Sylvania goes a long way in aiding that. It lets you pitch to shuffle your deck and stack up Sylvan on top. And then it excavates at the end of your opponent's turn. It can set up a lot of interesting interactions where you can, like, put a Marsh Leaf on top if you didn't want the cards, and then just pass. Your opponent, if they make a push, they try to deal with your cards, they know you're going to excavate a Marsh Leaf and kill their monster at the end of their turn. So you can put them in a lot of awkward spots. With Sylvania, I'm playing 1 Terraforming. I mentioned the power of being able to shuffle your library deck, Jesus. I played too much Magic sometimes. The power of being able to shuffle your deck after you Charity. And Terraforming lets you do that. That's why some list, specifically if you saw Hoven's list from Nationals, he plays double Terraforming, double Sylvania. To me, that seems excessive. I really want my Sylvanias to stick around. There's a lot of decks playing Artifact Ignition and Mystical Space Typhoon. So I chose to stick with 3 Sylvanias and 1 Terraforming. And then our last spell is just Book of Moon. It's somewhere between a spell and a trap. It's got a lot of offensive and defensive utility. It does too much for 1 card to pass up. Then our 3 trap cards, just 3 Vanities, Emptiness. A lot of what our deck's trying to do is go first, set up, and then set an Emptiness. Like, if you have Felgrand Spark, set an Emptiness, there's so few things in the game that can beat you. And because of that, I chose to play Emptiness instead of like a hand trap like Veiler or anything else. One thing that's notably missing from the deck that a lot of Sylvan decks have shied away from now is playing Rose Archer. Rose Archer's a fine card, but it doesn't help you with your Lonefire plays. You know, when you tribute a Lonefire, if they try to play a trap, you can't Rose Archer it. So, like, it leaves you in an awkward position. If I was going to play Spell Trap Removal, I would lean more towards Typhoon or Forbidden Lands. Probably Typhoon. But, from my experience, if you manage your Mushroom as well, that's more than enough to handle your opponent's back row. With the new role change, this deck loses a little bit of power. It never really wants to go second, but it also really wants all 6 of its cards that you start with currently. So it loses a little bit of power because of that, but I mean, you're still going to go first if you win the dice roll. You're still going to try to go off. And your deck is still fine going second. It's a buff to the going second power of the deck, obviously, since you'll be playing more cards than your opponent. So, like, it's in a very good spot still. It doesn't lose too much from those changes. Like I said in another video, really, in my opinion, the changes don't matter much. Going first is still just better most of the time. I haven't encountered a deck where I wouldn't choose to go first if I won the roll. The big difference is it makes decks that, like, are kind of neutral towards going first or second. Decks like right now that didn't really care too much, like very trap-heavy decks. Decks that were going to set cards anyway. Decks that can go off through back rows easily. They don't really care that much. It keeps it pretty neutral. This deck, it wants to go first, but having more cards than your opponent going second is still pretty good, since you can easily grind through their cards, clear them out with your excavations and your draws from Hermitry. Let's talk about the extra deck a little bit. There's a lot of cards that aren't in my extra that I would have liked to fit into it. For my 8s, I have Tooth Felgrand, Heliopolis, and Alce. I wanted to play Giant Grinder, but I couldn't make the space. There have been awkward times where I wished I could play a 3rd Felgrand, but that's just me being a jackass. You definitely don't need to play that, but I've wanted it. Then for 7s, we have Dracossack, Aurea, and Big Eye. Pretty standard. There's not really space in extras to play a bunch of the 7s as much as I would like to play 2 copies of Draco, but you just really can't afford the slot. Aurea is an incredibly good card, by the way. Like, if you guys aren't familiar with it, its ability to bounce a lot of cards is just so good. Then I play Mech-Whipped Engineer. I don't play any 4s. This deck can make 4s in very awkward ways with Princess Sprout and like Spore, but that's just not worth not worth trying for. The 5s and 6 you can't really make. Engineer, there will come up awkward plays off Soul Charge where you can make it, and it's very strong with your you know, your Felgrand Stardust boards and stuff to be able to make it too. So it's worth the spot in my opinion. Then for Synchros, I'm playing Leo. I chose not to play Star Eater and play Leo in its place. I just think Leo is such a strong card. It's just not being targetable is really good. 31's really big, and this plus a Vanity is a very good field. 8s, I'm playing Scrap Dragon, both Stardusts, and Colossal Fighter. The important ones are Scrap and Spark. They're cards you can't really do without. This is the best to protect your Vanity and or your Felgrands, and this has the best utility of destroying cards, plus it's a very big monster. Colossal, I expect a lot of people to be picking up Sylvans recently. It did pretty well at the World Championship qualifier, and it's just been a fan favorite for a long time, so being able to Colossal to ram into their Felgrands I thought was an ability I needed. Then I chose to keep regular Stardust Dragon. I feel like it's better than Spark if you don't draw Vanity, and I've found myself wanting 2 Stardust in a game. So I chose to play it instead of something like a Star Eater or the other 8s I wanted. I chose not to play Goyo Guardian. You can make it, but very, very awkwardly. It didn't seem worth the hassle to try to make it. So I'm playing Black Rose Dragon and Armory Arm with my last 2 spots. Armory Arm's kind of an MVP. Sometimes you just have to summon a Martial Leaf or a Curry Bandit and then use it to make this guy just to clear out a monster that your opponent has, a threat that's a little bit too big, or even just to make your Felgrand too big to deal with. Or any of your threats for that matter. Gaining an extra 1,000 can really be a difference maker. So that's the extra deck, and that's the whole list. There's not a whole lot of innovation going on with this deck anymore, really. A lot of the cards are so mandatory to play, like, yes, you don't need to play this many Mushrooms or this many Martial Leafs, or you can play more Martial Leafs or more Princess Sprouts, but all you're really doing is shifting numbers of cards we're already playing. There's not very many cards that aren't being played in the deck already that you want to play. The only exception being trap cards, or if for some reason the meta shifts to the point where you really need to play hand traps. But I'll classify those in the same thing as defensive cards. So those are the only changes you can really make. Adding more defensive cards to the deck, but like Vanity does what you want. Your deck tries to create unbeatable fields rather. Jeez. And Vanity does that better than any other card. The game is obviously mostly about special summoning, so if you can lock your opponent out of that, like, it's game over normally. Especially with a Felgrand, an indestructible monster, or Effect Negator, whichever way you want to look at him. So, this deck's still really strong moving forward. It was not the best deck last format, but it was a very strong pick, and I think it'll continue to be a strong pick for the foreseeable future. So, thanks for watching this, guys, and be back with more videos soon.